Did Elvis really steal his music? Was the king of rock and roll actually a musical thief? These questions have haunted music historians for decades. Elvis Presley's legacy as a cultural icon is undeniable, but controversies about the originality of some of his biggest hits continue to spark debate among fans and critics alike. Let's dive into the murky waters of musical inspiration versus appropriation, exploring 5 Elvis tracks that have been accused of being rip-offs. Number 5. Hound Dog, a Blues Queen's original turned Elvis hit. Have you ever wondered why Hound Dog sounds so authentically bluesy? That's because it wasn't Elvis's song first. Before Elvis Presley made Hound Dog a household name in 1956, there was Big Mama Thornton, a powerful African-American blues singer who originally recorded the track in 1952. Written by legendary songwriting duo Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, the song was crafted specifically for Thornton's strong, commanding voice and distinctive blues style. Thornton's original version spent 7 weeks at the top of the R&B charts and sold nearly 2 million copies. Her rendition was raw, soulful, and carried the authentic weight of the blues tradition. The lyrics in her version were sung from a woman's perspective, lamenting a worthless man who was just sniffing around her door. When Elvis recorded his version 4 years later, several significant changes occurred. The tempo was increased substantially, the lyrics were slightly altered to make them less sexually suggestive, and the overall feel shifted from blues to rock and roll. Elvis famously performed his version on The Milton Berle Show, creating a sensation with his gyrating hips that scandalized 1950s America. While Presley's producers did purchase the rights to record the song, many critics and music historians have pointed out that Elvis essentially took a blues song by a black artist, syndicated for white audiences, and received vastly more fame and financial reward than the original artist. Thornton reportedly received only $500 for her recording, while Elvis's version sold over 10 million copies worldwide and became one of his signature songs. In later interviews, Thornton expressed some bitterness about this disparity, stating, "That song sold over 1 million copies. I got one check for $500 and never saw another dime." The story of Hound Dog represents a common pattern in early rock and roll, where white artists would cover songs by black performers and achieve greater commercial success due to the racial barriers in the music industry and society at large. Music historian Peter Gorilnik has written extensively about this phenomenon, noting that Elvis himself never claimed to be an originator. However, the enormous gap in recognition and compensation between Thornton and Presley has led many to view Hound Dog as a prime example of cultural appropriation in American music. Number 4. Love Me Tender, a Civil War ballad reborn. Did you know one of Elvis's most beloved ballads was actually a recycled Civil War song? Love Me Tender, released in 1956 as Elvis's second #1 hit, wasn't an original Presley composition. The melody was taken directly from Aurelia, a sentimental ballad written in 1861 by W. Fosdick and George R. Poulton that became popular during the American Civil War. Aurelia was a widely known folk song by the time Elvis recorded his version. The original song told the story of a man's love for a beautiful maiden named Aurelia, with lyrics that painted vivid imagery of her charms. The melody's simple, heartfelt quality made it a favorite among Civil War soldiers who would sing it around campfires, thinking of loved ones back home. When Elvis entered the recording studio to create Love Me Tender for his first feature film of the same name, New lyrics were written by Ken Darby, though credited to Elvis and Darby's wife, Farrah Matson, for contractual and marketing reasons. The melody remained almost identical to Oralia, but the lyrics were transformed into a straightforward love song that suited Elvis's tender vocal style. Ken Darby later revealed in an interview, "Elvis couldn't read music. He had no formal training. He did his own thing with it, which was probably better." Despite this admission, some music purists viewed the reuse of such a recognizable melody without much alteration as lacking creativity, especially considering it was presented as a new composition. The film Love Me Tender was originally titled The Reno Brothers, but was renamed after the song became such a massive pre-release hit, selling over 1 million copies in advance orders alone. Elvis's recording became one of his most beloved ballads, treating a softer side of the rock and roll rebel. Unlike some other controversies surrounding Elvis's music, the borrowing from Oralie wasn't particularly hidden or denied. By the 1950s, Oralie was in the public domain, meaning no copyright infringement occurred. However, the minimal acknowledgement of the song's origins at the time of release has led some critics to include it in discussions of Elvis's tendency to repansi existing material. Folk music historian Alan Lomax noted that this kind of melodic borrowing was common practice throughout music history, stating, "The folk process has always involved adaptation and transformation of existing material." Still, Love Me Tender represents a clear case where Elvis achieved tremendous success with a melody that had been in circulation for nearly a century before he recorded it. Number 3. Blue Suede Shoes, Carl Perkins' overlooked original. Ever wonder why Elvis seemed so comfortable performing Blue Suede Shoes? That's because it wasn't his song to begin with. Blue Suede Shoes is often mistakenly thought to be an Elvis Presley original, but the song was actually written and first recorded by Carl Perkins in 1955. Perkins, a fellow Sun Records artist and pioneering rockabilly musician, released his version in early 1956, where it became a hit on both country and rhythm and blues charts, a rare crossover success for the time. The inspiration for the song came from a peculiar source. Perkins reportedly overheard a young man at a dance warning his date, "Don't step on my suede shoes." This casual remark sparked the idea for what would become one of the most iconic rock and roll songs of all time. Perkins wrote the song that night and recorded it at Sun Records with Sam Phillips, the same producer who had discovered Elvis. Perkins' original version was climbing the charts and gaining momentum when tragedy struck. In March 1956, while traveling to appear on Perry Como's TV show, Perkins was involved in a serious car accident that hospitalized him for months. During his recovery, Elvis Presley recorded his own version of Blue Suede Shoes. Elvis's recording was released on his debut RCA album, Elvis Presley, in March 1956. To his credit, Elvis reportedly held off releasing his version as a single out of respect for Perkins, though it did appear on his album. When Elvis performed the song on The Milton Berle Show and The Steve Allen Show, many viewers assumed it was his original composition. Sam Phillips, who had produced both artists later, said in interviews that Elvis's version was more commercial, but that Perkins' original had more feeling. Music critics have noted that while Elvis brought his characteristic energy and charisma to the song, Perkins' version had a rawer, more authentic rockabilly sound that better reflected the song's roots. The similarities between the two versions are striking. from the chord progression to the overall arrangement. Elvis did put his own stamp on it, with his unique vocal inflections and performance style, but the core of the song remained Perkins' creation. Over time, many casual fans came to associate Blue Suede Shoes primarily with Elvis, rather than its creator. Carl Perkins reportedly harbored no ill will toward Elvis, understanding that such covers were common in the music industry. In later interviews, Perkins maintained that Elvis had been respectful about the situation, saying, "He told me he'd been doing it ever since it came out, and he'd been so busy he hadn't had time to record it." Nonetheless, music historians often cite Blue Suede Shoes as an example of how Elvis's immense star power could overshadow the original artists whose work he performed. Number 2. Don't Be Cruel. Originality in question. Was Don't Be Cruel truly Elvis's creation? While credited to Jaucour Otis Blackwell, the story behind this 1956 hit contains some interesting twists. Don't Be Cruel became one of Elvis Presley's signature songs, topping the charts for an impressive 7 weeks and touting his unique vocal style, but questions about its originality and the unusual crediting arrangement have made it a subject of discussion among music historians. Otis Blackwell, an African-American nauker and pianist, officially wrote, "Don't Be Cruel." However, the song's publishing credits tell a more complicated story. Elvis Presley was given co-writing credit on the song, despite not actually writing it, a common practice at the time for major stars who wanted a share of the publishing royalties. Blackwell later confirmed in interviews that Elvis had not contributed to writing the song, stating, "He didn't write any of it. It was a deal that was made." This arrangement was orchestrated by Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who routinely demanded that songwriters share credits with Elvis as a condition of him recording their songs. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that Blackwell admitted to writing Don't Be Cruel with Elvis's vocal style in mind. He even recorded the demo for the song, doing his best Elvis impersonation to show how it should be performed. When Elvis heard the demo, he reportedly insisted on copying Blackwell's delivery almost exactly. Some music critics have pointed out similarities between Don't Be Cruel and earlier rhythm and blues recordings, suggesting that Blackwell himself may have drawn inspiration from existing songs. The call and response structure and certain melodic elements bear resemblances to songs from the R&B tradition, though this type of musical borrowing was pervasive in early rock and roll. Elvis's recording of Don't Be Cruel was completed at RCA Victor's New York studio on July 2, 1956. The session is legendary in rock history, as Elvis reportedly demanded multiple takes unusual for him until he felt the performance was perfect. The resulting record, backed with Hound Dog on the B-side, became one of the most successful singles in music history, selling over 6 million copies. Despite not having written the song, Elvis made Don't Be Cruel his own through his distinctive performance. His interpretation featured his trademark vocal hiccups, slurred words, and rhythmic innovations that helped define the early rock and roll sound. Musicologist Alban Zak has noted that Elvis's performance style itself constituted a form of composition as he transformed written material through his unique delivery. The practice of giving artist co-writing credits continued throughout Elvis's career. Music industry veteran Ernst Gorgensen has estimated that Elvis received co-writing credits on at least 45 songs he recorded, despite having minimal or no involvement in their composition. This practice, while questionable by today's ethical standards, was relatively common in the 1950s and 1960s music business. Number 1. Suspicious Minds, A Second Hand. Classic. Did you know Elvis's comeback hit wasn't even written for him? Suspicious Mind, released in 1969, is widely regarded as the song that revitalized Elvis Presley's career after years of middling movie soundtracks and declining chart relevance. However, few fans realize that not only did Elvis not write the song, but it had already been recorded and released by another artist before he ever stepped into the studio with it. Mark James, born Francis Rodney Zambon, a knocker from Houston, Texas, wrote Suspicious Minds and recorded it himself in 1968. His version was released on Scepter Records but failed to gain any commercial traction, disappearing without making an impact on the charts. The song might have been forgotten entirely if not for producer Chips Moman, who remembered it when working with Elvis at American Sound Studio in Memphis in early 1969. When Elvis first heard the song, he immediately connected with its themes of relationship distrust and emotional struggle, perhaps seeing parallels to his troubled marriage with Priscilla Presley. The recording session for Suspicious Minds, on January 23, 1969, became legendary, with Elvis recording 8 takes before feeling satisfied with the result. The difference between Mark James's original version and Elvis's interpretation is striking. James's recording had a more straightforward arrangement with less dynamic range. Elvis and producer Chips Moman transformed the song with a powerful build-up, gospel-influenced backing vocals, and a dramatic breakdown section that highlighted the emotional tension in the lyrics. A notable controversy emerged around the final released version of Elvis's recording. Without Elvis's knowledge or approval, producer Felton Jarvis later added an artificial fade-out and fade-in near the end of the song, extending its running time. This edit was reportedly done to increase the song's length for radio play, but displeased both Elvis and Chips Moman, who felt it disrupted the natural flow of the performance. Despite being a cover song with a questionable edit, Suspicious Minds became Elvis's 18th and final #1 hit in the United States. Music critics widely consider it one of his finest vocal performances, touting his remarkable ability to convey emotional depth and vulnerability. Rolling Stone magazine ranked it pound 91 on their list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. Mark James harbored no resentment about Elvis's success with his composition. In fact, he went on to write several other songs for Elvis, including Always on My Mind, which later became another classic in the Presley catalog. James has stated in interviews that hearing Elvis perform his song was a career highlight, saying, "When you're a jokerer and someone like Elvis does your song, it's the ultimate." Some purists have argued that Elvis's version of Suspicious Minds represents another example of him achieving greater success with someone else's material. However, others contend that his interpretation so thoroughly transformed the song that it essentially became a new creation. Music historian John Jackson has noted, Elvis didn't just cover songs, he reimagined them and often improved them immeasurably. The success of Suspicious Minds also highlights an important aspect of Elvis's artistry that is often overlooked in discussions about originality: his remarkable ability to select material that suited his voice and persona. Throughout his career, Elvis demonstrated an intuitive understanding of which songs would showcase his talents, regardless of their source. The case of Suspicious Minds differs from earlier appropriation controversies, because by 1969, the practice of established artists covering songs was widely accepted in the music industry, with proper attribution and royalty payments typically in place. Mark James received full Joker credit and royalties for Elvis's recording, unlike some of the earlier, more problematic examples in Elvis's catalog. The success of Suspicious Minds helped launch what fans call Elvis's third act, coming after his initial rock and roll breakthrough and his Hollywood years. This Renaissance period featured some of his most mature work and demonstrated his continued relevance in a rapidly changing musical landscape dominated by rock bands and singer-songwriters. As with many other songs in Elvis's repertoire, Suspicious Minds raises questions about the nature of artistic contribution in popular music. If a performer can so completely transform an existing song through interpretation, what constitutes originality? Is the jucanor or the performer more responsible for a song's ultimate impact and legacy? What does it mean when an artist repeatedly finds success with other people's material? Does Elvis's undeniable impact on music history outweigh concerns about the origin of his hits? And in the end, who really deserves credit when a song becomes a timeless classic, the writer, the performer, or both?